Elizabeth Spannhake believed she was making a simple decision. On the afternoon of January 31st, 1976, she chose to walk away. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't meant to be permanent. She was angry, the kind of anger that burns hot but fades quickly, the kind of anger that makes you want distance, silence, air. She believed that if she walked long enough, the argument would dissolve behind her. She believed she was walking home. Instead, she was walking into history. Before we go any further, if you're drawn to real stories that refuse to be forgotten, stories buried by time, silence, and unanswered questions, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. We publish long-form, documentary-style true crime every week. Stories others stop telling. And as you watch, pause for a moment and comment below. Where are you watching from? A city, a state, or a country? Because this case didn't just affect one town in California. It left echoes across the world. Now let's begin. Marie Elizabeth Spannhake was 19 years old. Friends and family called her Marliz. She had grown up in Cleveland, Ohio, a city defined by cold winters, close-knit families, and expectations that life would unfold in predictable pattern. But Marie wanted more. She was described as gentle, thoughtful, and quietly determined. She wasn't loud or impulsive. She didn't seek danger. She sought independence. She wanted to know who she was outside of her family, outside of the town she grew up in. When she met John Baruth, she saw a possibility. John was older, confident, already living the life Marie imagined for herself. Their relationship moved quickly, faster than some friends thought was wise. But Marie believed it enough to leave everything she knew behind. In late 1975, she packed her belongings, hugged her family goodbye, and moved more than 2,000 miles west of Chico, California. She arrived hopeful, nervous, unfamiliar with nearly everything around her. She had been in Chico for less than 1 month. She didn't know the streets. She didn't know which neighborhoods emptied after sunset. She didn't know that walking alone could be dangerous. Not because she was careless, but because she trusted the world more than it deserved. On January 31st, Marie and John visited a local flea market. It should have been a harmless afternoon, browsing stalls, passing time, doing something ordinary, but something went wrong. Witnesses later reported seeing the couple arguing, not screaming, not fighting physically, but tense, emotional, the kind of argument that carries weight, the kind where words land harder than intended. We don't know exactly what was said. What we do know is this: Marie reached her breaking point. She turned away from John and walked off. She didn't ask for a ride. She didn't wait to cool down. She chose independence, even if only for a few miles. She began walking along Mangrove Avenue. Mangrove Avenue didn't look dangerous. It was long, straight, and ordinary, a road people drove every day without thinking twice. Cars passed. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky. No one remembers seeing Marie struggle. No one remembers hearing her scream. Somewhere between the flea market and the apartment she shared with John Baruth, Marie Elizabeth Spannhake disappeared. That night came and went. When Marie Elizabeth Spannhake failed to return home, the silence was louder than any argument. At first, John Baruth told himself she needed space. The fight at the flea market had been intense. Marie had stormed away, angry and hurt, and John assumed, as many people do, that time would soften the edges of whatever had been said. He believed she would cool off, find her way back, and they would talk it through. Hours passed. Night fell. Marie didn't come home. By the next morning, concern replaced irritation. John checked familiar places. He waited. He listened for the sound of the door opening. It never did. By February 2nd, 1976, 2 days after Marie vanished, John contacted the Chico Police Department. When officers arrived at the apartment, they expected to find signs of a young woman who had chosen to leave. That was the most common explanation when someone disappeared without witnesses or violence. But what they found told a different story. Marie's clothes were still neatly hanging in the closet. Her suitcases were untouched. Personal items, makeup, hairbrushes, everyday essentials, sat exactly where she left them. Even her toothbrush remained in the bathroom. This wasn't someone starting a new life. This was someone who expected to come back. That discovery immediately shifted the tone of the investigation. Police turned their attention to John Baruth. He was the last known person to see Marie alive. They had argued publicly. Witnesses confirmed it. Friends later described the relationship as strained, not abusive, but unstable. Two young people still learning how to live together, still learning each other's boundaries. In cases like this, investigators follow statistics. And statistically, the person closest to the missing woman is often responsible. John was questioned in detail. He told police about the argument at the flea market. He admitted they had fought, but insisted it wasn't violent. He explained that Marie had chosen to walk away on her own, that he believed she would return once she calmed down. Police pressed him on the timeline. What time did they arrive at the flea market? What time did Marie walk away? Which direction did she go? Did anyone else see her? John answered every question. He didn't refuse cooperation. He didn't lawyer up. He didn't disappear. Still, suspicion lingered. Investigators explored rumors of drug use. In the 1970s, drug culture carried stigma and suspicion. Police examined whether substances could have fueled violence or impaired judgment. No evidence supported it. With no witnesses, no physical evidence, and no body, the case rested almost entirely on circumstantial questions. So police took the next step. John Baruth agreed to take a polygraph test. Polygraphs are not foolproof. They don't detect lies. They measure physiological stress. But at the time, they carried weight in investigations. John passed. For police, it was a critical turning point. Without contradictory evidence, they had no legal grounds to hold him. John Baruth was officially cleared as a suspect. And just like that, the investigation lost momentum. Police expanded their focus outward. They looked at Mangrove Avenue, the road Marie had walked that afternoon. Officers retraced her route. They searched nearby areas. They spoke to residents. No one reported hearing screams. No one saw a struggle. No one remembered anything unusual. It was as if Marie had simply vanished. Tips came in. Some claimed to have seen a young woman matching Marie's description hitchhiking. Others believed she had been picked up by a stranger. A few suggested she had run away, overwhelmed by a new city and a troubled relationship. But none of the tips led anywhere. Every theory collapsed under scrutiny. If Marie ran away, why leave everything behind? If she hitchhiked, why no confirmed sightings? If she met someone voluntarily, why never contact her family again? As weeks turned into months, the case grew colder. Marie's family in Ohio waited for news that never came. They replayed her last known moments over and over, searching for meaning in ordinary details. Did she mention feeling unsafe? Did she talk about leaving John? Did she seem afraid? There were no clear answers. By the late 1970s, Marie Elizabeth Spannhake's disappearance had faded from public attention. New crimes filled headlines. New missing persons cases took priority. Marie became one of many, a name on a list, a photograph in a file, a question without an answer. For 8 years, nothing changed. No body surfaced. No suspect emerged. No confession came. Until 1984. In November that year, detectives in California received information so disturbing that it forced them to reopen old files, including Marie's. A woman named Janice Hooker walked into a police station. She was nervous, shaken. Her voice reportedly trembled as she began to speak. What she told police sounded unbelievable. Janice claimed that she and her husband, Cameron Hooker, had kidnapped a woman and kept her captive for years. Not days, not weeks, years. The victim's name was Colleen Stan. Colleen had been abducted in 1977 while hitchhiking. According to Janice, Cameron had engineered a system of control so extreme that Colleen was kept inside a coffin-like wooden box, sometimes for up to 23 hours a day. Police were skeptical at first. Then they found Colleen Stan alive. Her story corroborated Janice's confession in chilling detail. Cameron Hooker was arrested. As investigators dug deeper, Janice revealed something else. Something she said she had carried for years. She told police that Colleen was not the first victim. There had been another woman, a year earlier, a young woman walking alone in Chico, California. Her name was Marie Elizabeth Spannhake. For detectives who remember the cold case, the name landed like a shockwave. Suddenly, Marie's disappearance fit a pattern. Young, alone, walking near a roadway, vanished without a trace. Police reopened Marie's file. They questioned Janice in detail. They compared timelines. They looked at where Cameron and Janice Hooker lived in 1976. Red Bluff, California, within driving distance of Chico. The coincidence was impossible to ignore, but coincidence alone was not enough to bring justice. Janice Hooker was not just a witness. She was also a participant, and that complicated everything. What she described next would become one of the most disturbing alleged crimes in American true crime history, and it would raise a question that still haunts this case today. Was Janice Hooker telling the truth? Then Marie hadn't simply disappeared. She had been abducted, held captive, and killed. Detectives immediately reopened Marie's cold case file. They compared timelines. Marie vanished in January 1976. The Hookers lived in Red Bluff at the time. Red Bluff was within driving distance of Chico. The geography lined up. The opportunity lined up. And now, for the first time in 8 years, investigators had a possible narrative explaining what happened to Marie Spannhake. But there was a problem. Janice Hooker was not a neutral witness. She was deeply involved. She admitted to helping her husband commit crimes. She admitted to deception. She admitted to standing by while another woman was abused for years. So detectives had to ask the hardest question of all. Was Janice Hooker telling the truth about Marie? Or was she rewriting history? Minimizing her role, exaggerating Cameron's, or inventing details that couldn't be verified? To answer that question, investigators turned their attention to Cameron Hooker himself. Cameron was not what many people expected. He wasn't outwardly violent. He wasn't visibly unstable. To neighbors, he appeared ordinary, quiet, unremarkable, forgettable. But beneath that surface was a man obsessed with control. Psychologists later described Cameron Hooker as a sadistic manipulator, someone who derived satisfaction not only from physical dominance, but from psychological destruction. He planned meticulously. He engineered fear. He enjoyed obedience. The wooden box wasn't just a prison. It was a symbol, a way to erase identity. And according to Janice, the box was not Cameron's first experiment. Marie Spannhake came before it. Janice described how Cameron had spoken about wanting to test limits, to see how much control he could exert over another human being. Marie, she claimed, was the first. When detectives questioned Cameron Hooker about Marie Spannhake, he denied everything. He admitted to abducting and abusing Colleen Stan. The evidence was undeniable. But Marie, he claimed he had never met her, never seen her, never harmed her. There was no body to contradict him, no forensic evidence, no witnesses, only Janice's testimony. And testimony alone, no matter how horrifying, was not enough to charge him with murder. Prosecutors faced a legal nightmare. If they offered Janice immunity in exchange for her cooperation, they could secure Cameron's conviction in the Colleen Stan case. But if they pushed too hard on Marie's murder without physical evidence, they risked losing everything. A deal was made. Janice Hooker was granted immunity. Her testimony helped send Cameron Hooker to prison for 104 years. But Marie Spannhake's case remained unresolved. Still, Janice continued to speak. She told detectives what she claimed happened to Marie. What she described next would become one of the most disturbing alleged accounts in true crime history. And the reason this case continues to haunt investigators to this day, because according to Janice Hooker, Marie Spannhake didn't die quickly. She suffered, and she begged to live. What follows is not proven in a court of law. There are no photographs, no forensic reports, no recovered remains. What exists is testimony. A single narrative told by one woman. A woman who admitted she participated in unimaginable crimes, but who was also granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation. This is what Janice Hooker said happened to Marie Elizabeth Spannhake. According to Janice, it began on the side of the road. Marie was walking along Mangrove Avenue. alone, still angry from the argument at the flea market. She was unfamiliar with Chico, unfamiliar with the risks. She was doing what countless people have done before and since, trusting that the world would not harm her for simply existing in it. Janice claimed that she and Cameron Hooker were driving through the area when Cameron noticed Marie walking. He slowed the car. They offered her a ride. At first, Marie hesitated, but the distance was long and she was tired. The couple appeared ordinary, non-threatening, a man and his wife offering help. Marie got into the car. According to Janice, it was only when Marie realized the car was not stopping where she expected that fear set in. She tried to get out. That was when Cameron grabbed her. Janice said Marie fought. She screamed. She begged to be let go. But Cameron was stronger, and the car kept moving. They drove north, away from Chico, toward Red Bluff, California. Marie had no idea where she was being taken. When they arrived at the Hooker's home, Janice said Cameron forced Marie inside and down into the basement. The basement, Janice claimed, was already prepared. This was not spontaneous. According to her testimony, Cameron had built a device he called a head box. It was designed to fit tightly over a person's head, blocking vision, muffling sound, and creating isolation so complete that the victim could no longer orient themselves to time or space. The box was placed over Marie's head. She could not see. She could barely hear. She could not scream loudly enough to be understood. Janice said Marie was then suspended from the ceiling rafters by her wrists. She was helpless. Janice claimed that she tried to comfort Marie, telling her that she would not be harmed, that everything would be okay. But Janice later admitted that this was not true. What followed, according to her testimony, lasted through the night. Cameron allegedly used a pellet gun, shooting Marie in the abdomen repeatedly, not to kill her, but to cause pain, to assert dominance, to test her limits. Janice described Marie crying, shaking, pleading. When Marie continued to scream, Cameron allegedly became enraged. Janice claimed that he attempted to silence her permanently, tried to cut her vocal cords with a knife. The attempt failed. Marie survived, but she could no longer speak. Janice said there was blood, panic, confusion. But Cameron did not seek help. He did not stop. Instead, he continued. Unable to speak, Marie was given paper and pen. That is when Janice claims Marie wrote a message that would later become one of the most haunting details of the case. "I'll give you anything you want if you let me go." It was not a threat. It was not defiance. It was desperation. According to Janice, Cameron ignored the note. She said Marie was strangled shortly afterward. 19 years old, far from home, no one coming. Janice claimed that once Marie was dead, they wrapped her body in blankets and loaded it into the car. It was still dark. They drove north, toward a remote area near Lassen Volcanic National Park. Janice said they buried Marie in a shallow grave. But here is where the story begins to fracture. When investigators asked Janice to lead them to the burial site, she couldn't. She described being fuzzy on the location. She pointed to general areas, forest roads, clearings. Search teams combed the land. They found nothing. No remains. No clothing. No grave. Without a body, Janice's account could not be corroborated. And without corroboration, prosecutors face an impossible decision. Charging Cameron Hooker with murder based solely on Janice's testimony would be risky. If the case failed, Cameron could walk free, even from the crimes against Colleen Stan. So prosecutors made a choice. They focused on the case they could prove. Cameron Hooker was convicted for the kidnapping and abuse of Colleen Stan and sentenced to 104 years in prison. Marie Spannhake's case was left behind, officially unresolved, unofficially haunting. But even Janice's testimony raised troubling questions. Why had she waited 8 years to speak? Why couldn't she remember the burial site? Why did some details change over time? Critics argue that Janice may have exaggerated or fabricated parts of the story, either to minimize her own guilt or to frame Cameron as the sole monster. Others believe she told the truth, but trauma and fear distorted her memory. And then there are those who believe the truth lies somewhere in between. What is undeniable is this: Marie Elizabeth Spannhake was never seen again. Her body has never been found. And Cameron Hooker has never been charged with her murder. But the story doesn't end there. Because decades later, long after the trial, long after the headlines faded, Marie's name resurfaced in the most unexpected way. Not in a courtroom, not in a confession, but in an apartment. And in the words of a child who should not have known her name. In the American justice system, there's a phrase that carries enormous power. No body, no case. It is not a written law. It is not carved into statute books. But it has quietly ended more murder investigations than almost anything else. And for Marie Elizabeth Spannhake, it became the final barrier between truth and justice. Despite Janice Hooker's detailed testimony, prosecutors faced a brutal reality. There was no physical evidence, no remains, no grave, no forensic proof tying Cameron Hooker to Marie's death. Everything rested on the words of one woman, a woman who had admitted to participating in crimes, who had been granted immunity, and whose memory was inconsistent when pressed for details. In court, that would not be enough. So Cameron Hooker was never charged with Marie Spannhake's murder. Officially, Marie remained a missing person. Unofficially, many investigators believe they already knew what had happened. Cameron Hooker was sentenced to 104 years in prison for the kidnapping and abuse of Colleen Stan. For decades, he remained behind bars, not for Marie, but because of the life he destroyed after her disappearance. Janice Hooker vanished into anonymity under a new identity. Marie's family never received a body to bury. Time moved on. Years passed, then decades. And then in the year 2000, Marie Spannhake's name surfaced again, not through evidence, not through confession, but through something far more unsettling. A woman named Jodie Foster moved into an apartment in Chico, California. Apartment 14. She didn't know its history. At first, everything seemed normal. But soon, strange things began happening. Jodie reported vivid, recurring nightmares, dreams so intense they left her shaken long after waking. Objects in the apartment appeared to move on their own. The atmosphere felt heavy, oppressive, as if something unseen was always present. Then her young daughter, Hannah, began to talk. She was only 2 years old. Hannah spoke about an angel. She gave the angel a name, Marliz. The pronunciation was strange, not a common name, not something a toddler would easily invent. Then came the drawings. Hannah drew pictures of a woman Jodie had never seen, a young woman with long hair, sad eyes, and a quiet expression. The resemblance was uncanny. When Jodie mentioned this to a neighbor, the reaction was immediate. The neighbor went silent. Then she told Jodie the truth. Years earlier, a young woman named Marie Spannhake had lived in that apartment. She had disappeared. Jodie was stunned. She had never heard Marie's name before. She had never researched the apartment. She had never told her daughter anything remotely connected to the case. And yet, the details Hannah described matched Marie with disturbing accuracy. Jodie contacted authorities. When detectives listened to her account, they were reportedly shaken. Not because they believed in the paranormal, but because Jodie described specific details that were not widely known. Still, once again, there was nothing concrete. No evidence. No remains. No legal action. The case returned to silence. But within the true crime community, speculation never stopped. Online forums dissected every detail. One theory focused on Road A17, an area near Lassen Volcanic National Park that some believed had not been thoroughly searched. Another rumor emerged involving a map of the Trinity Alps allegedly found in 1989 beneath the deck of a mobile home once owned by Cameron Hooker's parents. The map reportedly had a single pencil mark on it. When turned over to authorities, the lead was allegedly dismissed. Was it nothing, or was it another mischance? In the years that followed, Cameron Hooker aged in prison. In 2015, due to California's elderly parole program, he became eligible for parole. The idea of his release sent shockwaves through those familiar with his crimes. Parole was denied. Later, proceedings began to determine whether Cameron Hooker should be classified as a sexually violent predator, a designation that would keep him confined in a state mental health facility even after completing his sentence. To this day, Cameron Hooker continues to deny any involvement in Marie Spannhake's disappearance. He admits to Colleen Stan, but not Marie, and that denial is powerful. Because without a body, the truth remains legally unprovable. So where does that leave Marie Elizabeth Spannhake? She was 19 years old. She moved across the country for love. She walked away from an argument believing she would be safe. She was never seen again. Her case is a jigsaw puzzle missing its most vital piece. Without that piece, the physical evidence, the picture can never be completed. Was Janice Hooker telling the truth? Many believe yes. Was Cameron Hooker capable of murder? His history suggests he was capable of far worse. But belief is not proof, and proof is what the justice system demands. Marie Spannhake remains officially missing. No grave, no marker, no ending, only questions. And perhaps that is the most disturbing part of all. Not the violence, not the allegations, but the idea that someone can vanish so completely, leaving behind only echoes, whispers, and a name spoken decades later by a child who should never have known it. Marie Elizabeth Spannhake walked away angry on a January afternoon in 1976. She never came home, and unless her body is found, her story will remain suspended, forever balanced between truth and doubt, between justice and silence.